So you mentioned there building a business. It feels like yesterday when you just had 10,000 followers and we're kind of like starting in the field where I know Mike's probably going to listen to this and maybe he'll challenge you to something. But there's several people reading books and sharing about books and just creating as much value as they can. And then suddenly, and that takes a lot of work. And at the beginning, there's zero monetization and 100% of work. How did you turn that into a business? If somebody at the beginning was a side hustle, I don't know how close you are to making it your main hustle, but what would you say to somebody out there, maybe in this industry of book recommendations or in any industry? Hey, it's hard, but this would be I know it's difficult. It's tough to say this are the top 2 to 3, 5 steps, but if you could more or less create a map for somebody, what would you say? Because I remember 10,000, then 50,000. Now you're above 130,000. I would say you're probably, if not the top, one of the top book Instagrammers out there. So what would be your recommendation for somebody who wants to follow that journey and turning their side hustle into their main hustle at some point?
You know what? I could talk about this subject for hours, so I'll start and then you can tell me when to stop. But a little bit of backstory on that. When I started the Book Thinkers Instagram account, I had different intentions. We wanted to release a mobile application that could allow readers to retain and implement more information from the books they were reading. And it was taking longer to come to fruition than I had originally anticipated. Around that same period of time, I started reading a lot of these books. That's where the idea from the app came from. And I had received so many repetitive questions from friends and family members and friends of friends and acquaintances who said, hey, I heard you're reading these books, applying them to your life. Magical things are starting to happen. And I'm talking about in my personal health, in my personal wealth. I was working at a software company at the time, in my communication with friends and family. Like, it got around that these books were really changing things for me. And because I was receiving so many repetitive questions, I started to put that information on Instagram and other social platforms as a way to start to build a community for the app. Now, the app never came to fruition, but I started to build that community. And people were asking questions, making recommendations. I was building relationships with authors. And what I did realize, going back to the note taking, is that if I was reading with the anticipation of teaching it to other people, I was actually retaining and then implementing a lot more than I was previously. And so that act of rewriting your notes, that act of preparing some sort of video skit or video review to tell the world about, that is repetition, and repetition leads to retention. And so I noticed that not only did I love teaching this information, but I was actually growing faster as a result of managing the Instagram. And I wanted to give you that backstory because that was all up before 10,000 followers. It was very, there was a lot of trial and error, but it was also just because I was experiencing so much personal growth and fulfillment as a result of building that community. And then around the time of 10,000 followers, I had my first couple of authors reach out to me and say, hey, how much do you charge for a review? And I thought, charge for a review? I can get paid to read these books that I'm already reading for free? This is amazing. And I didn't know, I don't remember how much the first deal was, but I might have said something like, hey, for $50, I'll read and do a couple reviews on your book, and I'll upload it to your Amazon profile and my YouTube account, which I just started. And who knows, maybe you'll sell some books. And that was the birth of the monetization of Book Thinkers as a business. And so what's interesting in hindsight is that I wasn't originally passionate about personal development books. I had just started, so I wouldn't really call that a passion. I would call it more of an interest or curiosity. And through consistently posting and then actually consistently implementing the information in my personal life, I was able to build a passion. So the passion came from the consistency. The consistency did not come from the passion. I think that's something that people have backwards sometimes. So there was no pre-existing passion around personal development. It was created over time through consistency. Now, here I am with 10,000 followers and having a tough time really launching this mobile application and building that side of the business. But all of a sudden there's an opportunity to review books. Well, I knew that with more followers, authors would pay more. With more engagement, authors would pay more. And if I was working with bigger named authors, then they would want to borrow their credibility by working with me. And so those were metrics that I started to care about. I started to pay close attention to some social media growth gurus like Gary Vaynerchuk, reading their books and implementing the strategies that they recommended to grow your audience in an organic way. Organic is a really important term because it's easy to fake social media credibility now from a high level or from an outside perspective. But once you know the metrics, you know the metrics, and you can scout that stuff really easily. And I think the general public is getting a little bit more aware of it. But back to the point, I started to create different packages that authors could purchase to get more exposure for their book. And I started to jump on the trends of Instagram. I mean, I remember when Instagram Reels and short form video wasn't the main focus. It was the long form video, the IGTV stuff. And now that's changing over time. So I'm just aware of that. And recommendations for people who want to start, I would say video content is very important. Video content has been my biggest differentiator. Anybody on planet Earth can get behind canva.com and create a little graphic, post it on Instagram, Google a book summary and paste it into the description and get some content out there. But what's different for me is that I've been able to get behind the camera. And I think that video builds trust. It builds affinity. You can build relationships faster with people when you can look them in the eyes and hear about how they're expressing the book, what they've done in their personal lives to actually implement what they've been reading. And so I do get a lot of DMs from people, especially in the book space, that say, hey, I'd like to start to create content. What do you recommend? I say video content. And there's an important lesson that, oh man, I don't even know where I learned this, but I say it all the time now. You can't get to video 100, which is crisp and clean and edited nicely, and it's got a great background and you're very articulate. Maybe you do it in one take. You can't get to video 100 without your first 99. And so when I first started, my videos were very rough. When I go back and I watch them now, it's almost embarrassing, but that showed me how far I've come. I wasn't as articulate. My language was full of verbal pauses. The video quality wasn't great. It was sort of scattered. It was easy to interpret what I was trying to tell you in terms of my biggest takeaways from the book. But that stuff, it's trial and error. You got to grow over time. So video content builds trust, and video content is difficult to create, which is why there's such a high barrier of entry. You've got to put yourself out there. You've got to be transparent. You have to be okay being rejected by other people. Not everybody's going to like your content. Not everybody's going to like your face or your smile or your voice or the way that you talk about these books, but it's important because when somebody views your Instagram account or your social account or your podcast, you sort of want them to take a stance. Do they love you or do they hate you? If they're somewhere in between, they might follow you, but they might not interact very often. And that's a dangerous place to be on social media. So yeah, video content. So that's been the biggest thing for me. And it's also allowed me to differentiate against the other Bookstagram accounts because I am me. Nobody can fake that. Now, if I was just creating digital images on Photoshop or Canva and posting them, well, anybody else can do that. If you're just copy and pasting book summaries from some summary engine or Blinkist or something like that, anybody can do that. So it's going to be hard to make money if anybody can do it. The video content that I've been able to create is what differentiates my page from everybody else's. You might love me or you might hate me, but it differentiates. And so that's a little bit of a ramble. I could go on strategies and this, that, more stories, but that's a good introduction, maybe.